Hello, welcome to episode 197 of the CraftHouseMagic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 10th of February. So welcome everybody, I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since I last spoke to you, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today I have some knitting, I have a triple whammy blast from the past which is all knitting related, so I've kept those two things together. I have some sewing, a gadget, and a very naughty confessions. A very big naughty confessions. I'll save that for later. I have a couple of questions for the Ask Me Anything section, and also a little bit of information on my shop at the very end of the podcast. So we've got a couple of Makalongs going on in the Ravelry group and on Instagram. They're the Retro Mal and the Craft 20 a day. Details of those are in the description bar down below. But I do have a new prize for us. So we have a gorgeous cowl pattern, which is called the Starlight cowl pattern. And it's by Yarnia Designs. And I'll pop a picture up here so you can see what it looks like. So that is going to be one of the prizes for one of the cowls. So I'm drawing for prizes at the end of the Retro Mal, which will be at the end of March. And for the Craft 20 a day, I'm drawing every quarter, so that'll be March as well for the next draw. So let's get on with the knitting, shall we? I have a work in progress, or a half finished object to show you, and it is the Wishmaker mitts. So the Wishmaker mitts are a gorgeous pattern by Erica Mount. I always tend to do a Colourwork mitten every January. I get the urge to do them. And this is a gorgeous pattern. I had it on my wish list from last year and I've managed to get it done already. Well, not done completely because I've only done one. This pattern originally is supposed to be 3 colours, so this bit at the bottom and at the top is supposed to be a 3rd colour, but I've kept it in 2 colours because I just like it not to be too detailed, so I've kept it quite plain there, just doing the 2 colours of yarn. And on the back we have some diamond patterns, and this pattern goes all the way around the bottom. The top of the cuff and the thumb is a 1x1 twisted rib, the same as the bottom as well. And I love it, absolutely love it. I've got quite a bit done of the second mitten as well. So I've nearly finished the pair. I was so close to finishing the pair to show you on the podcast this week, but not quite there yet. But I'm really pleased with how that's come out. So the yarn that I'm using, I think it's Blacker yarns in this green colourway, which I've had in my stash for ages. And then some Jameison and Smith in the white to contrast that nicely. Or to have a little bit of contrast, but not too much. So that's how they're looking. And these mitten blockers I got from Woodico, which do custom sort of sizes as well, which is brilliant. They make them to order. They have a removable thumb there. You can attach it by the little holes, but I've just popped it in there to keep it shape. I haven't actually blocked this one properly, obviously, because I haven't finished the second one. But I'm very, very close. I've got that much of the white left, so I might have to purchase another skein of the Jameison and Smith, which actually is fine with me because I use these for Colourwork quite a lot, especially the white colour as a sort of contrast colour. And I've got plenty of the green left. So that is my work in progress for this week. I've been really busy sort of concentrating on that one project, so I haven't got loads to show you in terms of knitting this week. So I thought I'd do a special blast from the past for some of the Colourwork projects that I've done and show you some of those. So first of all, you can see that I'm wearing a Colourwork cardigan, and this is the Cherry Bloom cardigan by Lene Tosti, and it's got some beautiful colourwork across the yoke here, and I absolutely love this. So there's actually 4 colours in the Colourwork section. You've got the grey, 2 shades of pink and the green as well. But what I decided to do is actually knit the Colourwork in just the light pink and the grey to start with, and then I did some duplicate stitching for the centre of the flowers and also the green, just because I thought that this might come up really thick otherwise, because it was already quite dense with the two strands of Colourwork. The other thing that I did was I changed the button band into a 1x1 twisted rib to make that a little bit more simple. I think that there was some Colourwork in the rib as well in the original pattern, and I did this for the 2019 Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and I have a little label there which I actually got from the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, and it was from Barbara from Knitting I Love, and I sewed it on to remind me that I made this especially for them. And I love this cardigan. It is knitted in John Arbon textiles, knit by numbers. But the only trouble is it's really, really soft, but it pills like goodness knows what. It is a very pilly yarn. I think for a merino, the ply isn't very tight, so it tends to pill a little bit more. So I do have to de-pill it, especially sort of under the arms when I've worn it sort of all day. But it is really lovely and really pretty. I'm tempted to do some more Colourwork yoke cardigans actually, because I really like this one. I haven't told you the back actually. So this is the back of the cardigan. The yoke goes all the way around the back and it's just plain grey. So there we go, that's that one. And I have another one of my favourite Colourwork projects, and it is the Peary Fleurs hat, and this is a Kate Davis pattern, and it's got these gorgeous flowers on. Now I'm not one for having a very detailed Colourwork pattern that is very, very busy, but just look at that beautiful crown of the hat. I just had to make this. To be honest, I'm not very good at coping with quite a rustic yarn next to my head, my forehead. I'm quite a sensitive person for this sort of fabric, so I do intend at some point to line this, but I have actually done this quite a few years now, so if it ever gets done, we shall see. And you can see the floats on the back of the work, but obviously because it's quite a rustic yarn. This is in Jameison and Smith, and it's quite a tough yarn, although actually it means it doesn't pill as much. It does mean that it irritates my forehead when I wear it, so hopefully at some point I'll line it. But it is a very busy pattern and not something I normally pick, but great fun to knit. The third thing I've got from Blast from the Past is my Way Through the Woods mittens, and I absolutely love these. So these are quite a nice simple two-colour Colourwork, but they've got this addition of the Latvian braid on some of the areas around the cuff as well. But they were great fun to knit. But this was I think this is the first time I'd done mittens, and it took me a couple of tries to work out what needle size I needed to get it to fit my hand, really, to really fit nicely. So this is the Way Through the Woods mittens by Erica Mount, but originally this pattern was a mystery knit along, which must have been fabulous. But I did knit it afterwards. So that's the outside of the mitten, and the inside of the mitten's got like trees and like a bear on the inside, but I love those. So there's another one of my favourite sort of Colourwork patterns. So there we go, that's a little bit of a Colourwork blast from the past. I wanted to encourage you guys to have a go at Colourwork if you haven't tried it before, and don't be frightened of it, and just to take the plunge. Maybe a bit of trial and error to start with to get your tension right, but it's so fulfilling when you actually have a go. So those are my blast from the pasts, and I'm going on to my sewing section now, and I'm going to ask Barbara to come over and show us what she's got on. Thank you very much, Barbara. So Barbara is indeed wearing my heart jumper that I've done 2 wearable twirls for, and yes, you've seen it, I have wussed out the massive sleeves because I think this fabric might be a bit too much, both because it's quite busy and also because it's a slightly thicker sweatshirt fabric rather than the French terry that I was using for the sort of wearable twirls. But I am so pleased with how this has come out. I am going to make some more with the big bellowy sleeves, but I think this fabric needed to have the slimmer sleeve and the 3/4 length, because I think that I'll wear it a lot more then. I showed you that I'd ordered some of the matching cuffing fabric from Guthrie and Garni as well, and I'm really pleased I got that because it matches so nicely. I think because of this fabric it's very little stretch in it really compared to the other French terry fabric. Then I definitely needed the ribbing on this, and I think it just gives a nice balance to the very busy fabric as well. So if you watched last week's podcast, I was talking about the fact that I'd made some adjustments to this pattern. So this is the Billy pattern by Tilly and the Buttons, and the neckline on the pattern was really high. So around the neck I took off 1 centimetre from the sides and the back, but actually 2 centimetres at the front. So the one sample I showed you last week, I had only taken 1.5 centimetres from the front and 1 centimetre all the way around, but I decided to take off just that little bit more just on the front so that it looked like a more balanced curve around the neck once it was finished. Really pleased I did that. I really like the neckline now. What I also did is that on the test last week I showed you that I'd put 2 inches length onto the front of the garment, just where I'd marked where the bust apex was, cut along that line and then cut to the centre of the pattern piece, dropped that by 2 inches and then smoothed the curve out at the bottom. And I found that that was just a little bit too much, especially where I've gathered it together with the rib at the bottom. So with this one I just did 1 inch and it's absolutely perfect. So normally I'd need to add a couple of inches for the length of my bust, because obviously it's got a longer length when you've got the bust to go over. And that 1 inch fits really nicely and I'm so pleased I did that. So in terms of the Tilly and the Buttons patterns, I normally have a go-to size that I cut out. So to start with, when I first did a Tilly and the Buttons top pattern, it was the Cocoa. What I did is I just, the pattern size that I thought most closely fitted my size, and then I tried that, did a twirl with it, and then I found that I needed to actually go for a size that was quite a lot smaller around the shoulders. So I now grade out from, I think it's a size 5 at the very top of my shoulder, and then I grade out to a 6 on the arm, and then out to, I think it's out to a 7, just where the arm meets the side seam, and then out to a size 10 in the Tilly and the Buttons sizes out at the hips. So there's a lot of sort of grading from one size to another. But actually, once I'd found what sizes I need to grade from at different points, I then, every Tilly and the Buttons pattern that I have now, that's a top, I do exactly the same adjustment, so that it is so much easier. So even though I'm a really strange shape and size, it makes it easier for me to duplicate that in different garments with the same pattern company, that is. Obviously it's slightly different when I go for a different pattern company, but that's one of the reasons why I quite like Tilly and the Buttons, because I've really got down the pattern sizes that I really need. I know that, right, at the shoulders I need this size, at the bust I need this size, and at the hips I need this size, and then I can just grade out to those, cut that out, and I know that it'll more or less fit out the packet then. Well, it's not out the packet, but you know what I mean. So there we go, that's the Tilly and the Buttons Billy jumper, and I will have to give you a little bit of a twirl with it on. So if Barbara will let me try it on, I will show you what it looks like on me. So here we are. I absolutely love the way this fits. It makes me feel really slim by the way it's been fitted, and you can see now that the hem at the bottom is nice and even with that little extension at the front. The neckline, I really like that neckline. I don't like anything that's too high up here, and I always like a 3/4 length sleeve, especially because it's quite a thick jumper. The actual fabric of this is so soft on the inside, so that's going to be something that I wear absolutely loads. So again, the reason why I didn't go for the massive puffy sleeves is because it's quite a thick fluffy fabric, and I think that it would just been absolutely massive on the shoulders, and also with the heart pattern I'd have maybe felt like it's a little bit too much, a little bit sort of childish, if you see what I mean. But I do think that this fabric, just paired with the standard sort of shape, I just really like it on me. Really pleased about that. So there we go, ta-da! No Wonder Woman twirls this week, I'm afraid. So I'm going to keep it on now because it's nice and cozy. So I forgot to say, this fabric and the ribbon is both from Goofer and Garni, and I'll leave a link to it in the description bar down below. So next is my gadget section. and I have these really cute little tiny cutting mats that I use for quite a number of little things. I did buy a pack of 4 I think at the time, so I have them dotted around the house and they come in different colours, but this is the one I've got next to my sewing machine, so I thought it'd be easiest to grab. So I use them for several different things. I've got one that I put in with my English paper piecing set, where I can just use this small area to cut out little hexagons of fabric when I'm on the go, and I can pop that in a bag, and it takes hardly any space at all, with a small 18mm rotary cutter, and that's really handy to have something so small to pop in your bag. But I also use it for cutting buttonholes with the buttonhole cutter. These are from Clover, and they're just really handy to get a nice neat finish. I especially like these buttonhole cutters for when you're using jersey fabrics. If you've got a buttonhole in jersey, if you're using a seam ripper in a jersey fabric, it might stretch the buttonhole out, whereas this, you're cutting straight into the buttonhole and having a nice clean finish. And it's great to have one of those right next to your sewing machine. So that is my gadget for this week. I did have a look online, and I can't seem to find them on the same shop where I picked them up from myself, but there are a few other suppliers that you could possibly get them from, so I'll try and leave a link to a list of different ones I found on eBay. So next is my big confession. Okay, this is a massive confession. I've bought a new sewing machine. Although it's to do with work, so it's absolutely fine, it's fine. So I've been using my Pfaff Quilt Expression 4.2 for 10 years now, and I thought actually it really could do with servicing. Which I haven't actually had it serviced for 10 years because I've been sort of looking after it and cleaning it myself, but I think after 10 years now it really needs a bit of a service. So I thought actually if I buy myself a new machine, I won't be without a machine for a few weeks. And also I could do with one for going through thicker fabrics for bag making, and also something that's really good for free motion quilting as well. Not that my Quilt Expression wasn't good for free motion, but this is just better. So I've bought a Juki TL2200 QVP Mini, which is basically a miniature long arm quilter, which it's just similar size to my Quilt Expression, but I'm just loving the way that it free motion quilts, and it just stitches magnificently through thicker fabrics, so I'm really pleased about that. Hopefully I'll have remembered to pop a picture of it up here, because at the moment I've obviously got all the studio lights on right in front of my machine, so you can't actually see it in situ at the moment. But if you actually look on my Instagram page, there was a video of me doing some free motion on my new machine, doing some pumpkins on there. So if you want to see it in action, pop over to my Instagram page. Links to my social medias are all in the description bar down below. So that is my huge confession. I have a couple of questions from the Ask Me Anything thread now. So first of all, Jackie was saying, how does my week go? And as this, the podcast and my crafty sort of business is my work, she wonders how I managed to put my week together, and especially now that I've got a new baby. Now Jackie, I've got another huge confession to make. My husband has actually given up his job that he used to do, and he's now working with me in my shop and also helping me look after Jensen. So during the day we take in turns sort of looking after Jensen while I keep on top of shop orders most of the time. Then he helps me with shop things as well. He goes to the post office, he helps me skein yarn and things like that. So it's really helping me cope keeping the shop running when I've got a little baby, because otherwise it would be impossible. Just before Christmas Adam was still working, and I was thinking, how on earth am I going to do it if he's going to work in his old job? But he's now given it up starting from the beginning of January, and it's so much easier. And also Adam gets to spend a lot more time with Jensen as well. So it's a family business now. So in the evenings I'm not getting quite as much time to knit, as you can tell by the knitting content in the podcast, but I'm still managing to keep the business going and do some knitting, which is lovely. Right, so the next question is from Lene, and she says she's been doing lots of sort of quilting type of sewing lately, and then she tried sewing some polyester stretch fabric and it was a complete disaster. Don't worry, Lene, it's absolutely fine. There's lots of different tricks that you can use to help sew with stretchy fabrics. So she was asking, is there a special thread, tension, needle or stitch that are required for these fabrics? And absolutely there are. So first of all, the thread that I tend to use for stretch fabrics, I tend to use a polyester thread because it is nice and strong, and you will need a nice strong thread to be sewing with any sort of stretch fabric. You'll also need to use a special needle, so you'll need a ballpoint needle or a stretch needle, and both of those needles have got a ballpoint end so that you don't snag on the stretchy fabric. It can cause issues with the stitches not forming properly if you haven't got the right needle for the right fabric. So again, ballpoint or stretch needle for any type of stretch fabric. I tend to go to a ballpoint most of the time, just because I think it's more of a rounded end to the needle and I have more success with stitching with those. I also tend to go for a really good quality needle manufacturer as well. I tend to order the Schmetz needles. So these are the manufacturer I like to use. This particular packet is a stretch one rather than the ballpoint, but ballpoint are the ones that I prefer, and you can get big boxes that you can get in bulk as well, so there's like 100 needles in one of these, which I find more economical than buying just a small packet. But obviously if you're not sewing jersey as much as I do, you could go for those. So in terms of tension, I tend to stick to the standard tension that I use for just sewing other garments, but of course it depends on the fabric and your machine, so just have a little bit of a play on some scrap fabric and just run the stitches on the scrap fabric and just see what it looks like with the different tensions. And you do need a different stitch. So if you're stitching stretch fabric, you need a stretch stitch. So you can either use a zigzag, and you can actually use quite a small zigzag. I think you use a sort of 2.5mm wide zigzag. That's enough to be stretchy enough for the fabric, and that gives a nice neat finish. And if you're doing like a seam, I do the lightning stitch. So the lightning stitch can look different for different machines, but basically your machine's doing a zigzag stitch but sort of this way, so you can't see that it's as much of a zigzag. It goes backwards and forwards. I'll pop a picture up here of what some examples might look like on your machine, but you need to use that special stitch so that the seam is stretchier. Sometimes if you're top stitching jersey fabric, I think that it's quite difficult to do that sort of lightning stitch. So in some cases I'll just use a standard straight stitch if it is a neckline where the neckline is big enough to go over your head without it stretching. So in some cases I do tend to use that. Obviously you can buy specific machines like the overlocker and the cover stitch, which are specifically for using with stretch fabrics really, but obviously they're very expensive, and because I make so much jersey clothing, I sort of invested in those things, but it's still relatively expensive. But you can do it with a standard machine. Going back to the stitch type, if your machine hasn't got a lightning stitch, just use the zigzag, it's absolutely fine, but you will need a certain amount of stretch in most of your seams. So normally another thing that I like to adjust when I'm working with stretch fabrics is the pressure foot tension. So it's the pressure, the foot that glides along the fabric is pushing down on the fabric. So different machines have different mechanisms to adjust this tension. You might have a dial on the side of the machine where you can do like a medium, light and heavy pressure on the fabric. You want to be as light as possible when it's stretchy fabric, because you don't want to be stretching that fabric out and causing the fabric to distort too much as you're feeding the fabric through. I know with the Juki machines you have a dial at the top, and some of the older machines have a dial at the top, or if you've got an electronic machine you might have to adjust adjust something on the screen, just have a look at your manual and adjust that pressure foot tension. Because really you don't want to be dragging that fabric through with a lot of tension, because it can make your fabric stretch and then it'll warp, and then the fabric will be really warped once you take it out of the machine and it won't be nice and flat. Sometimes when you stitch garments, especially when I've got a sweatshirt fabric, putting the cuff in, you will have a certain amount of stretch once you've put it in terms of the steam. If you give it a little bit of a press, then the ribbon fabric should sort of tighten up and it'll become nice and neat again. So it does look sometimes like it's warped before you steam it, to give it a little bit of a press. But of course, if you've got a lot of polyester in those fabrics, just be careful what steam, what setting you've got your iron on. Another thing is, the main thing that you need to consider when you're sewing with jersey fabrics is that you really need to get the hang of not stretching the fabric as you feed it through. Be really careful. Make sure that you're not stretching the fabric. You've got you've got a bit of excess as you're feeding it through underneath the foot, and you're not pushing it, you're not pulling it at the back. If you do pull it as you're stitching, that'll make the fabric warp. So even if you reduce your pressure foot tension and you are pulling it, you will get some warping of fabric. One tip I'd follow if you are new to stitching with jersey is go for a cotton or more stable jersey. If you're stitching something that is very, very slippy, it is making your life very difficult. So do go for something that's more stable. I'd perhaps go for a slightly thicker jersey as well. So say like a Ponte Roma or a double knit fabric is slightly easier to sew than something that's thinner or very stretchy and slippy. Go for something like that first, just to get used to it. So I've got my shop update now, and then there'll be a little appearance of Jensen at the end of the podcast with some colour work on. So for the shop update, I'm just reminding everybody that the March yarn clubs will be available next week on the 18th of February at 7 PM GMT, and they'll be available until the 27th of February, and those will be shipped out on the 11th of March. So the February yarn clubs will be shipped out tomorrow if you've already purchased those, but I'm afraid it's too late to purchase February yarn clubs. They'll be shipped out tomorrow. If you want to be reminded that I'm updating things in the shop, if you subscribe to my email list, if you pop to my website crafthousemagic.co.uk, you can find the email subscription if you scroll down just to the bottom of the page. If you pop your email in there, you'll get an email update every time I put something in the shop. So now there's an appearance from little Jensen. So Jensen's really sleepy this week. He's got a cute little hat that was made by the lovely Eva from Coco and Flora. And we've got a gorgeous little top, which is a peanut top, and this was made by my lovely friend Claire. Are you going to wake up, Jensen? And Adam's holding him. Hello, Adam.
Hello.
I think we'll leave him go back to sleep. We've just been for a walk, that's why he's had his hat on. He's pulling a really funny face. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you next week. Bye!